Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Fred Nauer. I'm the Chief Flight Instructor for Thunderbird Aviation. I'd like to welcome you all to our monthly preventive maintenance seminar. I'll be introducing Paul Bloch, our Director of Maintenance, here in just a second. And then we'll get started. Let me switch the camera around and head on over. Paul, let's start the meeting here.
All right, sounds good. I'm Paul Bloch, and I'm the Director of Maintenance at Thunderbird Crystal. And right now we're at the Crystal location. And today we're going to talk about two things. We're going to perform an oil change. And then the other thing I'd like to talk about is the weight and balance of your airplane. I know Fred did one on talking about weight and balance. I just wanted to talk about a practicality from the flight and maintenance side on the weight and balance of your airplane and what we see in the maintenance department a lot of times. So first thing you'll notice that I did decowl this just for videography stuff for Fred. So you'll have to decide how much cowling you need to take off. Typically on the Warrior, we don't have to take off anything. We can lift up one of the side panels and get in and do enough for a basic oil change. In this case, also I wanted to show you, like on a Lycoming engine, we actually have an oil suction screen, and we're going to show taking that apart because a lot of times that gets forgotten about and not looked at. We'll talk about that in a little bit. What I've done already is I started over here, seeing that I want to get into this engine, and I wanted it draining for a while. We didn't have enough time. I grabbed the hose. Now you find yourself, in your hose sections. It depends on your quick drain. Most of them have a quick drain. There are a variety of outlet sizes on it. This one is a Curtis, and those Curtises usually will accept a 1/4-inch hose, so inside diameter hose. So that's what I have. I believe that's what it says on there. Yep, that's what that is, and that'll slide fit over there, and then just click your it has a little stop, push it up and click it into place and let the oil start to drain. Now if you're going to do a oil sample on one of these, well, when do you want to start collecting the oil sample? And the kit I grabbed was just one I had on the shelf there. There's many different varieties. I don't know, really. This is a Blackstone kit. There's a few brands out there. I think they're all good. I haven't heard anything negative. It all depends. When you start with one company, generally speaking, we're trending what your oil's been doing in this engine. So, it's best to trend on a new engine, new overhaul, and just keep watching it throughout the history so you can get a good idea on it. It comes with a little bottle and some paperwork and things. Paperwork you're going to need to fill out so they know what kind of cylinders you have. Are they chrome? Are they nickel? Are they steel nitrated cylinders? And then type of oil, how much time you have since your last oil change, and different things like that. I would say that probably the most crucial thing when doing the oil sample, and they'll talk about it in there, and that is, I've had this oil draining for 15 minutes now. Now I didn't warm up the engine, so it's draining a little bit slower, but it's still coming out quite well. So the idea is, if you've run the engine and everything's kind of circulating around, it's probably not going to be as crucial when you start that first drain. But say you're going to drain your engine, the oil's down in the sump, it's had a chance to settle. Definitely let, a minute or two, a few minutes go through, so you're getting kind of a mid sample. Don't want to get to the end where now it's just draining all that sludge back into it, because that's not going to be a good sample. So you kind of think of it as you want to get the, not the sludge at the bottom if it's settled out, and not and not the stuff that's kind of draining and pulling everything with it at the tail end. So kind of a middle oil draining sample. And like I said, in this case, since I didn't run it, it's, try to get it right, figure it out, let it drain for a few minutes, and then you're getting kind of the middle of the sample. It's not all the stuff sitting at the bottom of the sump. Because that's crucial. They're kind of taking a look, and if it settles out and you got more parts of particulates of sulfur and whatever they're looking at on the analysis, it could be high depending on where, in the draining cycle you've taken it. It is really the best if you do circulate it around. It evens the, shall we say, what they're looking for, the impurities or whatever, metal products, sulfur products, all those things will be circulated around because you've been running the engine. So that's the best. And still, let it drain a little bit before taking your sample. So just an idea on that. And then, fill out your paperwork, send it in, and then they'll send you a report back. It'll be a nice piece of paper. They'll email you, and then you'll see the report, and it just shows what your engine looks like as far as, metal products, sulfur products, different. You have quite a few criteria, and then they'll have a little analysis of what they think. If you got high indication in something, they'll maybe give you a suggestion, do the quicker oil change next time, or just kind of got some ideas. It's a trend. One thing, people come to me and they go, "Oh, I had a bad report, and I had another bad report, and I had another bad report." It's like, well, what are you going to do? You're going to pull the engine? These things are just kind of letting you know that something might be going on. But there's times where, I flew it, it was really hot out. Well, it maybe distressed it a little bit more, and that oil change, you might see some higher numbers on something. It's like I said, you're kind of looking at a long-term trend. Engines are always making metal. And we're going to talk about when we pull the filter and look at it, you're always going to find metal in there. I mean, that's reciprocating engines. They make metal. What we look at is, and that's all I always like, when you sign off and you've done your oil change and you cut off the filter and you say no metal found, well, baloney, you found metal. I always say no defects noted, because there's always going to be some in there. You cut that element, you can wash it out, you'll see particulates of things. It's when you see excessive amounts that you start to worry, and you start to want to take a look and talk to your mechanic and say, "Hey, what's going on here?" "Well, I wasn't flying a lot, this last winter, and then didn't have many hours. And then, my first oil change this spring there was some a little bit more metal showing up in there." And, that very well could be that over the winter, some of the cylinders rusted a little bit, and upon your first startup, and it's going to take some of the ring material and show up in there. And the other thing we look at is it magnetized. I know back, what was that, 7-0 November, our archer down at Flying Cloud, Fred, I found quite a bit of aluminum. Like, what's this going on here, And so we did another oil change in 10 hours. I wanted to see if it was still showing up in a quick amount. It's like, oh, there's still a lot of it. So we're like, talk to an engine overhauler. We started thinking about it's aluminum. What would be doing that? And I thought, the wrist pins on the cylinder, on the pistons, have aluminum caps on it. I said, well, I wonder if it's those caps. So I'm like, I pulled off one of the cylinders. And what had happened is, this was a newer engine, probably 300 hours, but somebody had overheated 3 of the 4 cylinders to the point where the steel barrel between the fins looked like a cheese grater. So it was taking those end caps and shaving them down. They were just, instead of having a nice curve to them where they slid up and down, they just kind of rub up and down the side of the cylinders. They were all sharp and flat, and it shaved that metal down. So we had to do cylinder work on it. We flushed all the oil system, flushed the cooler, did everything, and Now that engine's running great, and I believe now it's probably up 15, 16, 1700 hours, but it was telling us something. So that's why we look. Doesn't necessarily mean it's completely catastrophic. You've got to figure it out. And then sometimes, yeah, you've got to pull it apart and find out where it is. We were able to pull it apart little by little. It was pretty benign taking off the cylinders. Yes, expense to have them. We had to actually buy new ones. They were shot. But you know, it's not as detrimental as a whole overhaul. You know, at 300-400 hours, you're like, to be taking this apart. It should be going for another 1,700 hours. So, but anyway, so as we're seeing right now, we're letting that drain. And while we're doing that, I'm just going to briefly talk about weight and balance. First of all, like Fred, what did you talk on your seminar last week? What did you talk about as far as weight balance?
I just went through some basic terms as far as, you know, what does the FAA look for as far as the definitions of the datum line and the basic empty weight, what's all included in all that, what's an arm, what's a moment,
Yep.
and and then, you know, some basic simple calculations for the weight and balance from a pilot standpoint.
Yep.
Including how to do it on ForeFlight and how to do it on our very own my FBO scheduling system.
All right, Ned, I would like to tie in because that's what I'm thinking about on the, not quite on the maintenance side, it's kind of a hybrid, but as an aircraft owner and as a mechanic who does weight and balances for people and how I do some of ours. I look at it as there's also, I mean, yes, legally you have to have a weight and balance, and a legal weight and balance, how it's calculated from the factory is a legal weight and balance. What happens sometimes, which sometimes gets overlooked, is it's a legal way of doing this, but factory doesn't weigh every airplane. They have a list. And you'll see that a lot of times it's in your POH with the equipment list, and they have numbers attributed, weight numbers, arms, and things attributed to the parts. They're generally a little heavier than if you were to weigh each individual one. They're close. I mean, it's legally, you can use that number versus putting it on a scale to take off if you're removing something or putting it on. But what you find is most airplanes that you have are calculated from the factory. It's a calculation. And I always like to say that things happen to these airplanes that get parts taken out. You know, if it's less than a pound, a lot of times that's considered negligible weight. So it doesn't get thrown in there. There's modifications. Somebody, you know, the airplane came with wheel pants, but when I bought it, I didn't have wheel pants. Well, was that on the weight and balance? Did anybody ever take it off? And if you can't track that, it's a good idea to maybe throw your plane on scales and find somebody that has a set of scales. We have a set of scales. I own a personal set of scales that I lend to Thunderbird sometimes. And it's really interesting that you find everybody gets concerned because they're like, well, what if it goes up? I lose my useful load. And I said, generally speaking, most of the time people are happy with their weight and balances as weighed, because they usually come down because most of the calculations are kind of fudged on the conservative side. And you know, so I mean, and what I also like, even if you don't want to use it as your weight and balance, sometimes it's good to throw it on it just to see the practicality of how you want to weigh it. At Thunderbird, our weight and balances, and how I like to do them is practical weight and balance. So in other words, it's, if you look at our weight and balance sheets, it's including all these zero weights. Instead of doing oil every single time, what is the average oil you're putting in there? And usually we're keeping it around 6 quarts of oil. So I like to have that basic empty weight with that. We're using unusable fuel. Well, what does that mean, unusable fuel? It's the fuel that you can't quite get out. I mean, you have the what your tanks say, that's usable, the other is unusable. Well, a lot of times, you know, the best way of knowing where you're at is to top the tanks off, put the oil in. If you're going to use a tow bar, keep a tow bar in there and weigh that plane, practicality of where you're at. And just list the things in there as basic. This is part. Now in a Cessna does, the newer restart Cessnas require a tow bar in their weight and balance. A Piper's not going to require it in there in the weight and balance. But if you look in the POH, it says must be weighed with tow bar in there, Generally speaking, the things that are included are, if it says tow bar, POH, and there again, you can decide whether or not, the unusable fuel should be calculated in there. And like I said, I liked oil because oil a lot of times is a forgotten thing when people are doing the weight and balance. You want to calculate that every single time. If you know that this is where you keep your oil at, we keep ours at 6 quarts. So that's what's going to be in there. And you get an actual live weight and balance on there. And I'd be surprised, a lot of people, they come in and they go, well, this is our weight and balance. We just brought 3 airplanes in to Thunderbird online, and we go over the logbooks, and I'm looking at these old weight and balances. They're all over the place. They're all over there. And it's like, well, I got a weight balance here. Oh, was that superseded? It's a lot of people's logbooks. It's not really accurate. You find something. So I ended up all 3 of these airplanes. We re-weighed that. It's a hard word to say. And was surprised how what the previous owner was using wasn't even close. I mean, he was using one that had wheel pants off and there were wheel pants on. It's a good thing to just really, I think weight balance. Now, is there a lot of room in there for a little bit being off here or there? Yes, these things are very stable, very balanced very well. And you'll find them be close. It's close enough when they're calculated from the factory. But a lot of times, if you're kind of a stickler and you really want to know where you're at on this airplane, have it thrown on scales and you'll know exactly where you are. And there's other things that sometimes people do. What do we use for seat range on like a Warrior? 80.5.
Yeah.
Now, you can see that depending on, 80.5 usually is one of the first pin locations forward. If you look at if you measure out on the data line.
Yeah.
We use it just for the safety factor of, we know we're not going to be too far forward that heavy on but it's kind of a generality. So I've actually had customers who had seat locations where they wanted it weighed and weight and balance on there and actually have it marked where those seat pin locations were. On a lot of these airplanes, you move a lot. Seat moves a lot. If you have short legs, you're going to be forward. If you have long legs, you're going to be backward. So these are things that you can play around with and think about.
Yeah, the picture I showed last week, I had the Piper picture for the datum line was, but in the Cessna, when they talk about the arms, they got an average for the front seat, but then they got full forward and full aft too, so you can do your own calculation to figure out where it's going to be.
Yep, exactly. So there you can. I noticed that one time, quite a few years ago, we were really curious to see at using the 80.5, 2 big flight instructors, Dave and I threw in on the front seat in their location. Using the 80.5, they were nose heavy. We weighed them, and where their feet actually and their seats were, they didn't need to add any weight in the back. So you can see it makes a lot of difference, that seat moving forward. It's close. When it gets to the back position, it's pretty much right over the center of gravity here, or on the spar, which is pretty darn the center of gravity and center of pressure. So up forward, you're up this way. Fuel's at 95, and it's kind of here. And we're using 80 on the seat. That's kind of thinking about some of your feet are up there. That's why they give 8.5. Well, I don't know. I got light feet maybe, or maybe Fred uses concrete steel-toed shoes. His feet might be a little heavier. See, that's why there is an average on a lot of that stuff. And it's nice to have just kind of an approximation, and it's going to be fine. But if you're curious, weigh it, different configurations. But actually have something in there. Don't have something that was chicken scratch in 1971 that you can barely read, and you don't know, it doesn't say what was listed in there. Somebody had recalculated it. And then you look at your equipment list and you're like, well, it's checked off. They use that weight at the end of the equipment list from the factory. And it's like, well, that's not there. Well, that's not there. Well, that's not there. And you start adding up these things. And you look at the tally and you're like, huh, something doesn't look right. When that happens, start fresh and actually put it on scales. So anyways, that was just kind of my thing on there. A lot of the weight balances are kind of not so good. And make sure you have one. Well, I tell you, we come in and see somebody's POH. It's like, where's your weight? Well, I keep it with me in my flight bag. Oh, okay. But the best place for it is keeping your POH. Keep it on.
Well,
board.
it is a required document to be on board the airplane.
Right. If they have in their flight bag, it is.
Well, I suppose if they always
but
bring their flight bag.
If they always bring their flight bag. To me, that's not the best. Well, that's where I do all my calculations. Okay, have 2 copies. One in your flight bag and one in the POH and make sure they match. That's kind of, yeah. So, yeah. Things that have the onboard document spot that are actually there all the time. So, anyways, yeah. True. And the thing is, I don't know what will happen if you got ramped. You go, well, I carry that on my flight bag, but I've been over here and someone ramps you. I don't know what the feds would say on that one. They'd say, well, it's supposed to be in the airplane. It's like, oh, well, I brought it. It's over where I'm staying at. It's in my flight bag. Okay. So anyways. All right, well, that's stuff on weight balance, but it just gives you a little tie-in from my viewpoint on it. Well, let's get back to our oil change. So we have the oil draining. Like I said, take off the cowling at whatever level you want to take it off at or what you need to. And then what I think, I like using, if you can, depending on your airplane, you have your oil filters in different locations. This one happens to be back on an oil adapter facing backwards. Sometimes they're on a continental engine, they're on that adapter, but they're facing upwards. That's a messy one. And there's different ways of dealing with those. If you start your oil change at the night before, say Friday night, you just were flying and you're going to start draining it. You have one of those upper ones. A lot of times what works really well is to take an awl and just poke a hole in the top of the filter that allows the air to reach that area, come in there and drain the filter down into the base before you take it off. That helps from making a mess. Let's see here on some of the remote ones, kind of similar. They kind of make a mess. On this type of adapter, it works pretty well. And that is, grab yourself a kitchen garbage bag. Notice this one has a, use the ones with a drawstring. A drawstring helps and kind of guides you a little bit. So what I'll do is I'll take this bag in here like this, and I'll work it around, and I'll work the drawstring in behind where that filter adapter plate is back on the engine. Then I'll just take a little piece of masking tape, and it's usually conveniently close to a magneto or something, and I'll take a piece of tape, and I'll just tape that drawstring over magneto, get it back on that side. And I'll come over to the other side, Fred. And we'll hold around here. You can kind of see, here's the filter base back there. I got that drawstring back there. And it gives you something to work with there. And then a piece of tape, hook it to the bag. Hopefully it's not a whole bunch of oil in there that'll stick to something. Magneto's a little bit oily there, so just do it right there. All right, so now we got that stuck back there. It's not gonna, now when we loosen up our filter, then kind of just let your front of your filter or front of your bag just kind of, don't have it all tucked tight so you just runs out front of the bag. All right. Take our wire cutters. Now, in the wire cutters, a lot of times you go to a hardware store, you get short ones. These long ones, and generally you'll find them. Some hardware supply companies carry them. This happens to be a Snap-on one. They don't make it anymore, unfortunately. But these longer ones are kind of nice, and they come with a variety of degree angles. This one happens to be both of mine are pretty shallow degrees, and then there's some that are a little bit tighter like this. The tighter degrees are harder to get into, but any of them work. But the main thing is the longer handles are really nice. So a lot of times you're fighting with stuff in the engine to go get in there and snip it. If you look right now, look how easy this is for me to cut it. My hand's way out here. I can guide where I'm snipping it, and then I can just take the rest of the wire and I pull it off like that. And a lot of times, take a look at how it was safety. If this is the first time you do it, look where the safety was. In this case, there's normally a spot on this adapter plate, but it's been broken out. So now, if you notice, I looped it around, or whoever did the oil change last looped it around in an area where it's not going to fall off. And this is on your temperature probe. Just loop it around there, but just take a look. That's the biggest thing, is where it's been hooked to. Sometimes you look at it and go, oh, why did they do it there? That was not good at all. Well, find a different spot and just make sure you have it positive. You see, this is I'm taking this off. Which way did this filter want to come off? Lefty loosey, like this. So it would tighten up that wire. And you always want to be neutral to positive. Otherwise, if you're over here, with it, your filter, if you could loosen up and keep on going until it actually tighten the wire. So, and then I usually just snip the wire off here, so it doesn't snag the bag as you're spinning it. So that's a nice tool to have, longer wire cutter. And here's another one. They're not super duper expensive. I mean, $60, $70.
Talk louder.
Oh, sorry. $60, $70. This is a torque wrench filter pliers, filter wrench. So you can see it's got the ratchet portion in there. It's set up for aviation filters, which that is a 1-inch nut on the back of the filter. So it's really handy because you can take it off and torque them. Now, undo this. Pull it off in this case. Really easy to get in on with this thing. Now you'll see, Fred, as we pull this filter off. As I crack that, oil coming out of that, between the filter and adapter plate, and start to fill up the bag. So, and obviously it'll flow more if this was warm engine oil. It's very cool because I didn't run it up. So I just kind of take the filter like this, the rag with it just in case it's still out. And then while that is in the bag, I go over to where our bucket is, and just a Home Depot Menards bucket, put a little piece of safety wire on there, and this. Right into the bucket. Safety wire around. Now that'll be draining into the bucket. One thing I like to do also around here is I want that draining for a while, especially if it's cold. I'm not going to be able to cut that one open today to show you because it'll be all full of oil. It takes a little bit of time. If it's warmer, it goes a little quicker. I usually just mark on there And if you don't have a date on it, I just say 8. So now I know if it's, I don't mix it up, so I know that came from this oil change as it's draining, if I can't get to cutting it open right away. So now we see that the drain is pretty much done right there. Let that drip a little bit longer. And now we're going to, this case, I'm going to show the oil suction screen on there. Before I do that, I'll let that drain a little bit more. We're going to go over and take a look at that adapter plate and see how she's moving along here. Now what you find, yeah, that's pretty good there. Oil filter manufacturers have kind of changed their seals, well, probably within this last year or so. And depending on if you have old stock or new stock, you want to read the side and see what they say. Now, I just used the filter that we had that said, use a DC4 lubricant or oil. Now on this Tempest here, it says, number 1, install filter clean and dry. Do not use lubricant or DC4 compound on filter or engine mounting pad. And then it says tighten by hand, then apply 16 to 18 foot-pounds of torque. Safety wire around engine, check for leaks. Okay, so that's the one thing I want to look at there. I mean, if it says that, in the past, we just take a filter off and take some of that oil or DC4 compound or whatever. This thing's still draining, just kind of slather it around. Well, they want it dry now. So that's the one thing you want to maybe wait for a little bit for it to stop draining. Their seal must be different. All I can just fight these little buggers they put on the threads. They hard to screw up. Sometimes they come off. All right. So we want nothing on the threads. These seals, they want clean and dry. So when I come back, this one's still running a little bit. So I'm going to wipe it off. I'm going to spit on the filter. And one of the things I do, I get it snugged up there. Don't get it too carried away till you get your bag. Get it so it's not going to leak, but then pull your bag. Make sure you didn't pinch any bag in there, because that really can cause a drippy leak. And then what we'll do is I'm going to throw it. Oh, and now just to show you here, it's not always perfect, but at least I didn't do it in the bag. I poked a hole in my bag. So it does happen, but this is going to be an easier cleanup out there. So it's not always a foolproof thing to do, but it does keep your engine bay most of the time a lot cleaner. Sometimes oil changes can be a messy thing. Do it outside once in a while and you think that you're fine, and then it's blowing the oil coming out of the hose all over. You think you have it in the bucket, and, but you just take your time and see if you can not make a mess. Of course, I made a mess. I'm trying to get it cleaned up so quick. I don't stand on real quick, guys. All right. That's why we have rags. Always have rags, right? All right. So we stuck the filter out. We took the bag. We made sure that the bag was not in there. And so now, next thing is, it's nice about this handy dandy wrench is it's got the torque set in there. I have this one calibrated. You can actually go into a calibration. They say that they're set to a certain point when you get them. I have mine set right at 17, right in the middle, 16 to 18. So I have it calibrated to that, and it goes in. Let's put it back on here. Feel as that seal's tightening up, and then you can get to the point there. That little click there, just like any torque wrench, that's showing that you've hit, in this case, it's since mine's set to 17, I'm right in the middle of the range of torque on there. Now, one of the reasons if you have another torque wrench, you want to go to 18, you got a range, 16 to 18. One of the things I like about it is, and I'll show you right now, because what we're going to do is safety. Safetying the filter and getting it tight. And the little cheat is, as long as you're in the torque range, you can always back it off and tighten your wire a little bit. So I'll show you how that works. Here, piece of wire. How are we doing on time, Fred?
Got about 20 minutes.
Okay. Got a piece of safety wire. Most everything on an airplane, other than maybe a few prop bolts and where they specify, is done with 32,000 stainless steel wire. So that's your go-to. You're going to have if you're going to be doing some of these things, if you're going to have safety wire pliers, use safety wire pliers. This one can lock in the center position. You can go right turn, left turn. I'll show you what that does. It depends on when you're safetying something. It's a lot easier to go the opposite direction of where you want it safetied. So what I usually do is I'll make a little loop, wire around. Going around the stem here is a little bit, you want to make sure you get it down on that stem. So that's why I usually make a loop. So I'll get kind of a little pocket loop going, give it a little snug like that. Then what we're going to want to do is, half the problem is figuring out where you're going to get where you're going to stop your thread spins. So I usually go to the hole that I'm going to go through and just pinch my fingers in there. Then I'm going to take my pliers, right? And I'm going to lock it in that spot. Now in this case, I go left or right, doesn't really matter. So sometimes when you're going like around a bolt or something, you want the wire loop to be pushed closer to the nut. So you go, boy, if I spin it right, that's going to push that loop over. If I do it this way, it kind of falls off in the middle and wants to go to the other side. And that's why you'd have a right turn or a left turn. In this case, it doesn't really matter. So you can start to spin it like this. What I like to do is get her going. Sometimes by hand works really good in these tighter places where you can see where you're at. This is a rather large safety wire pliers. It's a 9-inch one. Preferably 6-inch ones are probably the most common and the easiest. So if you are going to buy one, buy a 6-inch one. This is my favorite safety wire pliers, but I lent one out to somebody and they lost my 6-inch one, and I can't, the manufacturer doesn't make them anymore. So they went out of business. So now we come down here, I'm going to do a little trial check. It's like, all right, that was a starting point, but it wasn't. As it spins up, it's a little bit short. So just go back. Say I'm going to add, 3/16 of an inch of twists on there. Fred, do you know what the twist pitch is per inch that we're shooting for?
I have no idea.
You kind of are shooting for about that 8 twists per inch. So if you look, let's count them here. This is probably about an inch right about there. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I'm on 8 to 10. Yeah, I wouldn't go tighter than that. That's about right there. So I'm on the tight side of it. The loose side would be below 8. So 8 to 10 is usually a nice number. It looks good. You can see that's a nice cording right like that. And so now we got that. We're going to take what I always do on this one is I give myself a little bit of a hook to get through there. Give yourself a bend, make it easy. Pull it through like that. We'll take our safety wire pliers, grab onto it, and give it a little snug like that. Wire, secondary wire around. And you don't have to go way up there. Come back here. So you just got to do a few more spins. Just done it all. slipped on my. Pliers. Sometimes the pliers don't grab the way you want them to. So I'm just gonna tighten that one again. Okay. Yeah. Started those two together. Safety wire pliers. There we go. And then at the end, I give the little snug like that. Lock your pliers. Cut your safety wire. Take your little, make your little pigtail like that, so you don't catch yourself on it when you're doing. Check your wire. Now that one's pretty tight. If that were a little loose and you knew you torqued it to the upper standard, what you could do is you just come back just a hair on it and just tighten it up. Now, I didn't have to do that because I was able to pull it pretty tight when you do it. And that's preferential. But one thing is when you see them and they're really loose, they're just vibrating around. And what's likely to happen if they're really loose, first of all, if they're really loose, you're not going to be able to back it up without getting out of the torque range. So then redo it. But if it's a little bit loose, what you'll see is it'll start to vibrating chatter on whatever you have safety wired. And then sometimes they can break with that chattering. So you like to have the safety wires pretty tight. So if you don't like it, cut it off, try it again. If you got a spool of that stuff on the safety wire. So, all right, now we're torqued, we're safetied. Okay, that's good. Now we're done draining. So we're going to release the end of our drain tube. I was talking to you. We got to let that drain. I don't have a oil filter ready to show you as far as cutting. And this is another tool you can get. Yeah, check to make sure that's locked and hose. But this is a oil filter cutter. There's different varieties of them. This one works really well. You put your filter in like in the end, the nut portion of the filter in a vise. Set this on top, and you just start tightening it around and cutting the can open. That's how you can get to the media and the filter. Really good to have that. Good idea to get one. If you don't, just go to your local mechanic and say, "I did my oil change, mark your filter with the date and what it is," and have him cut it open for you, him or her. But that's, really good idea to cut the filter open. You just don't want to throw them away. That's our indication of what's going on. I think more so than oil analysis long-term trend. Oil filter is going to be relatively immediate what's going on in the engine. If you see a bunch of metal in there, that's the time to talk to somebody and a concern. So how are we doing on time again, Fred?
About 12 minutes.
12 minutes, okay. Let's do this real quick thing. You guys know how to fill oil up. So what I'm going to do is I really want to get into, because I think this is a very part of, especially like when not only so, but all like ones I can think of have the oil suction screen filter. There again, you got your bucket here. Find your place. Now you're going to look somewhere on the sump. Here's your sump. That's where all the oil stores, and it runs down. The filter, the filler's there, and then it's all throughout your engine. But then it always goes back down to the bottom of the sump. Bottom of the sump. See, there's a nut here. We're going to go back in there. There's a little hollow spot. I can show you that because I got a filter. I got a sump off. I'll show you what it looks like from the inside. this is an Arrow IL360. Some very similar, but not quite the same as that 320 that's right there. But as if you look, we call it the oil suction screen because see where the screen is right there, and then you see the bottom of the sump. It's an indentation, and then see that big hole on the backside of the sump there by the gasket there, right here, Fred. Right there. That is actually where the oil comes through the screen, comes up in through the case here, goes up the back of the accessory case, and goes up through the oil pump sucking it up through there, and then producing pressure and delivering to the rest of the engine. So that's drawing, all the oil gets drawn there. All your oil and engine pressure, all that stuff is coming from the bottom of your sump. And it goes through the screen, and then goes up through the pump, and then through your adapter plate and through your filter. So the filter does all the fine particulates. The screen is there to catch anything big. Just in case you have problems, sometimes things will show up there. And it's a good idea to check it. If you have to do it every 50 hour, we do it every 100 hour here. Not every 50 hour oil change, unless there's something you're really concerned about. But if it's 50 hour, if it's only in the time frame of you fly once a year, I do it at that point. So why a lot of times people won't like doing these is they're a little tricky to get in your pliers and kind of a mess. So this thing. Pull the wire off. There's your wire there. Just gonna set that down there. Now this one's gonna take looks like a 5/8 inch wrench. I'm just gonna let that loose. Oh, I got it loose. That's the other thing, making a mess. You cut yourself a little cardboard trough, and works that nut off. Now sometimes you'll see this nut's been replaced with a little bit larger one, and it's got a heating element in it. It's not my fan. Some of the engine preheat companies replace that and use that. Now this is just your standard one. It's a cap. If that had the element, you'll see wires coming out of it. See our oils coming down like this. That's the other thing. Oop, see, remember I told you wind always wreaks havoc with you. Now this is going to be a crush gasket. If you do this, you're also going to need to measure out the crush gasket for this. That's available. And here is we'll pull this spring. Okay, you see there's a couple little chunks of metal, particles, nothing major. Most of it's pretty clean, but you'll find stuff in there once in a while, just a little something. This could have been, this is a new engine. This probably was a couple of things. This has probably never been changed since, never been changed since the new engine. Usually we like to do it after the first 100 hours. I believe this is the first 100 hour for this one. Really like to check that. So it gives you an idea. It's a finger screen. You'll see some carbon in there, but if you got a pile of stuff in there, and through the center of it, you got a problem. You can see there's some carbon deposits right there, a little more right there, and not bad. So I'll go rinse this out. You could use a little brake clean, bottle of brake clean. I'm going to go to our parts washer and do it. and then, let this drain out. Notice that we drained the sump, but that's still draining. Remember how we saw the bottom of that sump had a little cavity in there? That's the lowest part of the engine right there. Technically the lowest part. You wouldn't think of it, but since it's got a little concave down the bottom, it is. So it's always good to do that, but we'll clean this up, put a new gasket on there and tighten that back up, safety it. And then you can fill up the oil in the engine. So how are we doing on time? Probably time for questions. I think everybody
Probably
else.
time for questions.
Yep. All right, sounds good.
Nothing in the chat. So if you have any questions, just unmute yourself and just ask the question.
Paul, you said that you recommend changing oil at 50 hours or longer. How do you determine? The previous owner told me that he does it every 30. So,
Well, it's whatever
what?
it's whatever you feel comfortable. I mean, engine manufacturers, and it depends on what you have. If you have a Continental engine that does not have an oil filter, they'll say 25 hours. Turbocharged engines that produces a lot of heat, that oil's in there and really cooking away inside that turbocharger. You might want to do it sooner than that. Engine manufacturers, Lycoming says, if you're using your engine, you can go up to 100 with a filter, but we would recommend at 50. I mean, that's just the kind of their benchmark for most of their engines that we use. So take a look at that, and then you can tell when the oil is getting tired. This stuff is at 50 hours. It's starting to get pretty dark. It's done its job, So I don't really like the 100-hour oil changes because of all the lead and the sulfurs and stuff that build up from our avgas. Is not a good really not a good product for oil and the cleanliness of engines. Tetraethyl lead is not good in there, but we have to have it for the performance numbers until someday they come up with the new fuel, which, by the way, I was at Oshkosh. The new fuel looks really good that they're talking about. So we're really going to extend our TBOs, and it's just the infrastructure on it. But there again, take a look and see what your usage is. Time. You could say, well, oil sits there for, I don't like all the moisture. Say it's going in a hangar and you didn't fly it. I've had that oil. I got 3 hours on in the last 3 years. Yeah, I don't know. I think I might change it. Might not have a lot of the impurities in there, but it's going to have a lot of moisture. It's going to have it's just been sitting. It's not great. It's been open to the air, just sitting out. So kind of have to use your judgment on it. Like Lycoming generally goes for a 50-hour oil change with filters. Screens, 25 hours. And they talk about the fact that you could, in a flight school situation where we're dumping oil in all the time, and utilizing it and it's quick turnaround, that we could go to 100 hour, and they'd be okay with that. So,
Got it.
So you just have to kind of, in what if you want to change it at 35, change it at 35. Not going to hurt anything. It's not that expensive, really, relatively speaking, the oil, it's definite that your oil degrades with impurities. That's what it's doing. It's pulling stuff out. And there's a lot of impurities that are in avgas, such as the tetraethyl lead and the high sulfur content. So that's kind of what we want to get out of there. So
2 questions on the chat. What torque on the crush gasket? So when you're putting the screen back in,
you're going to have to look up what the manufacturer on this one. It's going to be, I think, on the Lycoming. I'll go look it up when I install it. It's going to be 300 inch-pounds, what they want on there. So, but every manufacturer is different. So you'll have to get that number off your manual. And I don't have them all sitting in my brain right at the moment. Continentals are it's all gonna be kind of similar to that, but I mean,
And when you're weighing an airplane, what kind of scales do you have?
I have intercom scales. They're not jack point scales. They're not load cells. They're the flat scale load cells. So you have to roll the plane up on it.
Any other questions?
Could you repeat the recommendations for summer versus winter? Type
On
of
the oil?
Yeah,
Okay, if you, I mean, most people are going to a multi-viscosity oil. And with a multi-vis, like what we're using, let me just grab a rag and I'll just show you what we have. It is a summer and winter oil. It's an all season oil. So we're using an SA20W50. So there's that 20W50. You got the two numbers. That's the multi-viscosity, which what we're using in automotive is a multi-viscosity. And then this one here, the Victory. This is like the XC, only the fact that it has that we're using the Lycoming anti-wear agent in there. So this has the Lycoming anti-wear agent, which like on our Seminoles, we have to use. And there's certain like 172 engines, the H2AD engine requires an additive in the oil because of the lifters. In our E16Ds or 6Ds and our Seminoles also require it. They had Ford rockers and did a different lifter system in there, and then there's an AD out on it. But other than that, the Lycoming anti-wear is just it just makes it it's an anti-scuff agent that Lycoming recommends in a lot of their engines after break-in. So that's why we're going with the Phillips Victory that has it in there. Aero shells, most of them with the W's. You'll see the W's or the W pluses. When you have two W's in there, the one is with the additive. You'll see it. I'll say it on the bottle. So like the 1550 is going to be W1550, and it's got the anti-wear in there. Straight weights, generally speaking, if you're going to go straight weight oils, generally when it's warmer temperatures, you just go with a higher straight weight oil. So a straight weight oil of 100 is going to have a viscosity of 50. So you figure that's going to be like the 50 weight. This says when it's warm, that's what it turns to. And it performs like a 20 weight when it's cold. So then in the wintertime, a lot of guys will go to like a straight weight 80, which is going to be a viscosity of 40. So, and then they obviously they go up from there. Round radial guys will use like a 60 weight or a 65 weight, which would be like a 120 or a 130. So
do you have to calibrate the scales for the weighing? They have to be calibrated?
Oh yeah, yes, they need to be calibrated. So you don't just go throw your bedroom scales on there to do a weight and balance.
So, but if you buy aircraft scales, they'll be
Yes.
set up. Do you have to do it? Is there a periodic check you have to do on them?
Yes, there is a periodic check. Yes.
Okay. And where do you get your torque wrenches calibrated?
We go to Martin Calibration.
Martin Calibration. Okay.
Yep. And then that intercom scale, they're in town here now. Ours have a self-calibration mode in them, and then it'll test them. But then we can bring them into Intercom, which is a local company, and get them looked at. So, but yeah, you want them calibrated. I mean, obviously, if it's an official weight and balance, if you're just doing it for fun, do whatever you want. It doesn't matter. And there again, you're going to have it signed off by an A&P, so they're going to make sure they are calibrated if they're using their scales.
Any other questions?
Well, the one thing I was saying is the thing that comes up with the balance, and that's the tricky part when if you just want to weigh an airplane, you can weigh it, but you have to, there's a leveling means when we do it. And it's always in the manual or there's something that says it. And Fred, did you ever look at this on these? See these two little screws there on the pipers? A lot of times they're marked. Sometimes that's off there. Yeah, look at that. It even tells you it's marked. Leveling point. So you back those screws off and set your level on there, and then you get your airplane in that configuration when you level it. That's how you get your weight and balance. Because if it's as the tail comes up, and it's a nose wheel plane, it's going to get heavier. Tail wheels, as they come up, they get lighter. Depending on how you weigh them, and then there's all these calculations and stuff, but you have to have the plane in its level configuration to get the balance portion of it. Doesn't matter the weight, all three wheels or whatever, you can come up with a weight, you just won't want to know what your balance is. But you'll notice as you bring it up, right now, if I were to put this on scales and it's tail heavy, that nose would be really light. You're not going to get a balance out of it. You'll get a weight because all three are going to stay the same. But as you bring it up, it's going to shift off the mains to the nose. And that's how we do our calculations from distance and things. That's where the balance comes in. So that's where you get your balance. It's off the datum line, and yeah, it's fun stuff.
Anything else? All righty. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming today. We did record this one, so if you have friends who are interested in information like this, it will be on the Thunderbird Aviation YouTube site. We have our own channel now, and so far I'm leading. They said I have 42 views on one of mine. The best one, you got 10 on one of yours so far. So
Well, come on, guys, help me out.
that's right. So tell
friends.
your friends, and
Yeah.
we'll get things going as far as the likes for Mr. Bloch here. But anyway, thank you everybody for coming in. As soon as I get the information of who came in today from my computer guru, I'll go into the FAAsafety.gov website and give everybody credit for this course. So thank you very much for coming today.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Have a nice weekend.